Hey, are you like us, completely alone and looking for something to play? Well, we've got you covered with this roundup of 20 great new single-player games from throughout 2021. Now let's get started off with number 20. The Dark Pictures House of Ashes is the newest from Supermassive Games' whole Dark Pictures anthology thing, and to be honest, we weren't too hot on the previous ones, but House of Ashes seemingly takes everything they've learned and fan feedback and stuff from the previous ones and really blows it out of the water. This is, of course, a very linear, story-based adventure game where your decisions matter, and it's one of those games where a lot of people would describe it as partially watching a movie and partial point-and-click adventure, but if you've played anything like their previous games, like Until Dawn, you know that it's pretty quality stuff. Some good scares, some really pretty graphics, and House of Ashes really steps it up in terms of it actually being pretty interesting and pretty scary and pretty fun. Check it out. Maybe consider it, even if you weren't too hot on the other Dark Picture games like us. Next, over at number 19, we have Chernobylite, or how it's actually pronounced, it's kind of like Chernobyliat. I'll admit I'm pretty bad at pronunciations, but Chernobylite is a pretty awesome game. It's definitely a PC gamer's style of game, but if you're into anything like Stalker or Metro 2033, or really any Metro game, Chernobylite has a lot to offer. It is a little bit rough around the edges, but what you have are loading into smaller maps, completing missions with some stealth and just some real good tension and some pretty graphics and spooky atmosphere, while going back to your base and building it out kind of Fallout style. Again, it's a little bit rough around the edges, but if you're into this type of game, you probably know what you're getting yourself into. The developers have been supporting it, there's a community behind it, and it's also on consoles now. We reviewed it on PC, but either way, if you're looking for a bit of a unique and different experience, consider it. Now, over at number 18, Hitman 3. We absolutely love Hitman 3. Essentially, what IO Interactive did here is finally crack the code on the whole episodic formula. They tried releasing Hitman 1 and 2 in different kind of ways, and now the whole concept of massive open-ended levels and tons of replayability, it really just connects here with some of the best maps in the series, some of the best scenarios, and just a ton of fun. As someone who has been playing the Hitman games from literally day one, Hitman 3 really kind of nails the experience once again, but in a modernized way that just gives you a lot of endless stuff to mess around with. It's just a really good murder man simulator. I think that's probably the best thing I can say about it. Expect it to make some surprise appearances on some Game of the Year lists. Next, over at number 17, we have Monster Hunter Rise, which marks kind of the debut of modern Monster Hunter gameplay and engine on Nintendo Switch. And it's pretty awesome. Dare I say, even cooler than Monster Hunter World? It's got a ton of content, a ton of great hunts, a lot of stats and items to chew through, some added verticality to the gameplay, and really just some impressive little upgrades here and there. And you could sink a lot of time into this one, but every minute of it is really, really satisfying. Gearing up and going on a hunt just feels better than ever, and it's totally at home on Nintendo Switch. The 3DS Monster Hunter games were some of the best, if you ask us, so Monster Hunter Rise is pretty awesome. There's a lot of depth to it, so maybe do your research first before you consider a Monster Hunter game, but if you dive in, you'll have fun. Next, over at number 16, we have Returnal, which is the PS5 exclusive run-based game where you play as an astronaut stranded on a planet with no memories, trying to figure out what's going on, and to do that, you need to shoot lots of aliens and dodge a lot of bullets, almost in a third-person shoot-'em-up style. The developers behind this, of course, really succeed at that bullet hell style of gameplay, and it translates over perfectly to third-person with a ton of challenge, some satisfying melee, some cool weapons, and some decent progression. Most recently, the game has been updated with a photo mode and the ability to suspend mid-cycle. There was a lot of controversy when the game released because if your game crashed or something, you'd completely lose your progress mid-run, but thankfully, now you can pause mid-run. And I will say the runs are pretty lengthy, so be prepared, but they are really satisfying with some great boss battles and some interesting story developments throughout. It's really cool. Although Returnal was like a big PS5 release, I still think there's a lot of people that haven't played it yet or checked it out, so maybe consider it. Next, over at number 15, we have Bravely Default 2. This is a kick-ass JRPG for the Nintendo Switch. The series, of course, was incredibly popular on 3DS. This was made in collaboration with the developers of Octopath Traveler, so it's got a really cool look to it. Once again, you're getting that combat system, the job type system, and fans of the series seem to be pretty happy with it. And not only is it on Nintendo Switch, but it's also on PC, which is great. The more JRPGs on PC, the better. Now over at number 14, sticking with Nintendo, Metroid Dread. This is another one you might think people are overhyping, but to be honest, if you ask us, we really like it too. It's pretty awesome. It's a really well-made Metroid game with some satisfying exploration and levels, some great boss battles, but with an added dash of like new, really solid presentation, cool cutscenes, an interesting story. Samus is badass and cooler than ever. The music is great. There's a good, nice, satisfying challenge to the game. And really for us, we think it marks like the return of Metroid in the mainstream. If you have a Nintendo Switch and you haven't checked this out yet, if there's one Nintendo game on the list, I highly recommend you check this out if you haven't already. It's a fun game to play through, but it's a really tough and satisfying one to master. There's a lot of replayability to it, especially probably more than you'd expect. Metroid Dread is pretty damn good. Next, over at number 13, we have Deathloop, which, you know, with the marketing and everything, the game was a little confusing. It is pretty much a single-player game. There are multiplayer-style invasions, which you can turn off, but primarily this is a single-player, narrative-based action-adventure game. You play as Colt, who is a really great character with really great voice acting, and he's trying to break this time loop. He's trapped on this island, kind of in a Groundhog Day, rinse-repeat type of thing, and he's also an incredibly adept murderer. So you're killing your way through these loops, trying to figure out how to crack the code and how to kill these very significant, important people on this island in order to break the time loop. It's got a little bit of Dishonored-style gameplay with cool, zippy powers, some satisfying stealth with some cool headshots, and you can also, of course, just go guns blazing with a cool shotgun or a heavy machine gun or whatever you want. However you want to play, there's a lot of freedom to this one. It's not super challenging. The game is really designed for you to just kind of have fun blasting your way through these levels, and it succeeds on that front. We think Deathloop is really cool. Next, over at number 12, we have Scarlet Nexus, a JRPG with a good action twist. This takes place in a pretty unique and compelling sci-fi world with some incredibly designed creatures that you are part of a force that are fighting against them, and you're using telekinetic powers that control really, really well. The ability to instantly, in battle, swing things around, toss things at enemies, and just generally use your mind for cool tricks while also hacking and slashing. It all just really works seamlessly. There's tons of cool character upgrades. There's a lot of story to chew through if you're into that type of thing. This one really flew under the radar. We think it's pretty underrated, and even if you're just a fan of cool combat systems, it's worth checking out. Next, over at number 11, Psychonauts 2. It's awesome. That's it, straight up. It's like an old school, fun platformer adventure game. The original one came out such a long time ago, and they straight up just decided to make a sequel. It plays similar to the original, but not in a busted way. It just feels like a celebration of those early 2000s games. It's got fun platforming, it's got cool powers, a couple of new additional powers, it's got some incredible boss battles and wild levels, and just some charming story moments. Psychonauts 2, we think, is everything you might want out of just a single-player action-adventure game. There were a lot of these back in the day, and we don't really get them like this anymore, so to get a sequel to a beloved one, we're very happy. That's really it, man. Next, over at number 10, we have Kena Bridge of Spirits. This PC PlayStation game is just a really fun adventure with pretty big open areas, fun dungeons to explore, and really just a world and a pretty simple story that is incredibly satisfying to actually see through to the end. You play as Kena, a spirit guide whose job is to guide spirits to the afterlife, and she does it with a cool magical staff, some powers, and the assistance of some woodland spirits called the Rot. These cute little critters will follow you around and appear throughout the environment and power up your attacks during some combat, which actually can get pretty intense by the end. We were shocked how hard and challenging this game can really be, but it is satisfying with some great boss battles, some cool moments, and also just some great exploration and puzzle solving. Not to mention the fact that also it's damn gorgeous. This is another one, like a few I've said on this list, where it's just a good old-fashioned action third-person adventure. If you're watching this video, you can see from the gameplay it's gonna either be up your alley or not, but if you play it, you'll probably smile. I know that sounds corny, but I mean it. Next, over at number 9, we have Lost Judgment, the follow-up to Judgment, which is a follow-up to the Yakuza series, and this game is nothing short of absolutely awesome. You are a private detective solving various mysteries throughout a district in Tokyo. 2 districts, in fact, that are pretty sizable, with a large portion of the game also taking place in a high school, which means you can beat up teenagers, which they're doing it. I don't know. It's a weird game, but it's so fun. All of the games the studio makes do a really good job of embracing just Japanese culture and like the soap opera storytelling with a nice mix of goofiness and fun beat 'em up gameplay. You're tailing people, you're chasing down suspects, and you're doing a lot of fighting with fighting styles, including an additional new one for this game that is a ton of fun. Judgment was really cool, and Lost Judgment is an absolute wild ride. Next, over at number 8, we have Far Cry 6, a game very much inspired by Cuba. It takes place on a fictional island called Yara, but it's very much going through a Cuban revolution type of thing, and you are a guerrilla fighter named Dani Rojas. This is a Far Cry game where it's very much more Far Cry. You're on an island, you're doing stuff, you're taking down bases, you're killing dudes, you're sneaking around, you're hunting, you're doing all that stuff, but here there's a little bit more player agency with an actually interesting main character, just a compelling story overall. Once again, a good villain, this time Giancarlo Esposito, and just more of an emphasis on zany, crazy action. It almost feels a little bit like Far Cry mixed with Just Cause, and for us, it's a perfect mix. We were kind of getting sick of Far Cry, but this one managed to still give us a pretty fun time. If you're over these games, you might still be over them, but if you're just looking for a fun new Far Cry playground, you'll probably have a blast here. No pun intended. Next, over at number 7, we have the Grand Theft Auto Trilogy Definitive Edition. Now, at the time of recording this video, this isn't out, but we have had it revealed, and what it is essentially a collection of the original, really game industry changing open world games, Grand Theft Auto 3, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, with pretty shiny new graphics, new lighting, new character models. Seems like most of the radio stations are returning, which makes us very happy, but also some redesigned gameplay, a little bit beefed up shooting and controls, which they've compared to playing like Grand Theft Auto 5, which sounds good to us. Granted, there's still a lot of questions up in the air. We've only seen little snippets of gameplay, but we just really like the Grand Theft Auto series, so the option to revisit the original games with a fresh coat of paint on it sounds kind of nice. And over at number 6, let's talk about another collection of old games. It's Mass Effect Legendary Edition. This one, no BS, is a really good collection and remaster of the original trilogy, which is just an incredible series of RPGs. They didn't mess anything up. They fixed some controls and some RPG stat stuff from the first game, really beefed up the graphics there. Then 2 and 3 are just running at higher frame rates, higher resolutions, and they're just still damn good. If you've never played Mass Effect, now is the time. Jump into this collection. I guarantee you're gonna have a ton of fun. You make your own character, you make your own decisions, you learn and discover this incredible new sci-fi universe that BioWare built, and they're legendary games for a reason, and they're calling it the Legendary Edition, and you know what, I agree with that. Down to number 5, we have Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. This PlayStation 5 game is absolutely gorgeous. You could probably tell right here on screen there's a lot going on, but underneath the shiny exterior, there's a really awesome, solid Ratchet & Clank game. It plays like a Ratchet & Clank game. It's a fun adventure with really cool encounters, cinematic moments, and 2 playable characters. Rivet is added to the mix in the adventure, and she's actually really well written and interesting and really well placed into the story. She doesn't come off annoying. She doesn't come off as like a replacement for Ratchet. They really work well together, and we're excited to see where her adventures could continue. But you flip-flop playing as both of them throughout the game in some really beautiful environments with that very much classic style Ratchet & Clank exploration. You're collecting bolts, you're upgrading your weapons, and you're shooting bad guys. It is incredibly satisfying. Some of the newer stuff like the quick loading, the ability to kind of tether and yank yourself through dimensions is nothing short of really impressive. But even all that fancy stuff aside, it's just a good old fun game. Now over at number 4, we have Tales of Arise, the newest JRPG in the classic Tales franchise. This one is set up to kind of be accessible and really get new players in. So if you've never played a Tales game, this is a great place to start. It's an incredible new world, interesting characters, and a really fun combat system. The way you bounce off of your other allies in this like partially real-time combat system is great. The abilities are awesome. The ultimates you trigger are cinematic and satisfying, and the story has a lot of depth to it. There's all these variety to all these different worlds with all these different cultures. Every single area you move to feels unique and distinct as you become more badass throughout the story. On the surface, it might look like just another JRPG, but I assure you it's not. It's just a really good one. Now down to number 3, Halo Infinite. Oh boy, we had to mention this. Of course, at the time of making this video, this one isn't out yet. It's releasing at the end of the year, squeezing in December 8th. And we're pretty excited. We've gotten a new recent glimpse at the campaign, and it looks way more interesting and satisfying than our look that we got at it last year. Remember Craig? So what it seems to be is just an kind of open-ended Halo game that looks to just embrace fun and not overdo anything crazy. Now, the multiplayer is interesting as well, because a lot of us have gotten our hands on it through the multiplayer technical tests and all that, and it is releasing as a free-to-play type thing. How is Halo going to translate over to free-to-play? We're gonna have to wait and see when it comes out, but the actual moment-to-moment gameplay and map design so far, from what we've seen, does seem to be pretty satisfying. Again, there's still a lot of questions. The game hasn't released yet, but if it's a good solid Master Chief adventure and a compelling multiplayer experience with some good earning and good progression, we'll be happy to play it. Down to number 2, if we're talking single player games, Guardians of the Galaxy is pretty sweet. It was a really big surprise for a lot of people. While it initially looked rough around the edges, what we have here is just a really great story-based action-adventure game. You play as the Guardians here, like kind of a nice hybrid between some of their comic interpretations and the James Gunn Marvel movies. The way it works here is that you play as Star-Lord with his cool blasters and his jet boots, but really he's only a small piece of the pie because you're also actively controlling all the other members, and they're really powerful, so it's kind of got this whole leadership, slight kind of RPG dynamic to it, but it's all real-time fun action with some really big set-piece moments, some over-the-top scenes, and lots of, I mean a lot of smaller, quieter character moments. They tell a really interesting and charming story here. It's got a bunch of cool music, as you would expect from a Guardians thing. And if this one wasn't on your radar, to be honest, it wasn't on ours, put it on it, because Guardians is really damn awesome. Now down to number 1, Resident Evil Village. Yes, it came out this year. Doesn't it feel like this has been a really long year? But once again, we have another solid Resident Evil game. As much as I am an old person and I really miss the old style of games, the switch to first person has really made for some tense moments, some good action, and still just that classic survival horror feel. You're stressing about ammo, you're stressing about bullets, but this one does go a little hog wild compared to 7. This one gives you a lot more crazy action and a lot more opportunities to just blow your enemies away. But what you get here is just some incredibly atmospheric environments, some fearsome enemies, some good boss battles, and a weird story. As someone who's been playing these games since day 1, I'm really curious to see where it's gonna go after this, because what? I'm not gonna spoil anything though. If you're looking for a solid horror first-person adventure game, Resident Evil Village will definitely scratch that itch for you. I'm really excited to see what Capcom is gonna do in terms of like story DLC expansions. It could go anywhere, and I'm excited to see it. Those are 20 games, but we actually have more than 20, believe it or not. We got a bonus section, so the first thing worth mentioning is also Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut. It's got that Iki Island expansion, which gives you a ton of new gameplay, new enemy types, new environment, new armor, stuff like that. It's just more of an already awesome game. Along with that, Age of Empires 4. If you're playing on PC and you like these style of games, this is a good one. It doesn't really rock the boat too much, but it looks incredible, it plays awesomely, and it's got some fun history stuff to it. Also, believe it or not, this year it released Subnautica Below Zero. If you like Subnautica, this one is a little bit of a different spin, but it's really fun. And if you're looking for some fun 2D action, gotta recommend Ender Lilies, Quietus of the Nights. This is slowly rolled out to multiple platforms, and it's a ton of fun. But those are 20 single-player games worth highlighting this year. Single-player games are not dead, my friends. There's plenty to play, there's plenty to dive into, so we want to hear from you in the comments what your list is. If you got your own top 5 or your own top 10 or your own top 20 of games that you've played this year, definitely let us know. Drop it down there. But thank you guys for watching. If you learned about a new game, clicking the like button's all you gotta do. It really helps us out. And if you're new, consider subscribing, maybe hitting that notification bell, because we put out videos every single day. So thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.